performing was an escape for me. Yeah, I grew up in the classic alcoholic family, so I had a very unstable childhood, and I did definitely found an escape in performing. But one of the things I inherited from my parents is a slightly obsessive nature, and I say slightly, maybe I'm underplaying the nature of what I inherited from them. But that meant I would be seized by interests that would be all-consuming, and drumming was one of those, to the point where I would start to feel quite unwell if I wasn't able to play music for more than a week or so.
You're part of one of the biggest bands this country's ever seen, but looking at what you've all ended up doing different things. Damon's done 3 solo albums, Graham's done 10, Alex is off making cheese. Why have you waited till now to make your first solo album?
Well, I'm not sure I have waited. I haven't been sitting around going, is the time right? No, not this year, maybe next. I've always done whatever seemed most interesting at the time. That's my life philosophy. For the first kind of 15 years of Blur, that was a full-time job. There wasn't time to do anything else, really. Since then, when Blur became a part-time job, I've done all kinds of different things. Whatever seemed most interesting at the time, really. I've been a computer animator, I've been a criminal lawyer, I'm a flying instructor, all kinds of things. And the kind of common thread between them all, as it's all been kind of person-to-person things. That's what I found I was missing with Blur. Sort of one-on-one, looking somebody in the eye and being helpful kind of things, which is that you get less and less, the bigger and bigger the band gets, you less and less get that sense of kind of you being personally helpful to an individual. And the upshot of all of that is I found I was missing the ability to go on tour, to make music, all of that. I found I had to scratch that itch again, which I thought I had scratched. And I started off doing film music. My film music career went quite well. That gave me a lot of confidence. And I've always been a songwriter. I just decided to try and put that to some use and see where that would lead me.
Tell me about the album, because I want to get back to some of the themes you just raised there. But let's talk about the album first. It's called Radio Songs. Its title has a little clue as to what inspired it. I mean, radio has played a big part in your life through your father. Tell us a little bit about that.
That was the start of it, really, yes. My dad was a radio engineer in the RAF when he was a young man, and he got from that a love of electronics that sustained him through his entire life, and he passed that on to me, whereas some fathers and sons might go to football matches together or go fishing together. He and I would sit around the kitchen table with soldering irons, building radios and plugging them into an antenna we had in the back garden and spinning the dial and tuning in stations around the world. And I found that then incredibly exciting, the idea of making something and switching it on, a piece of electronic equipment that I still find incredibly exciting today. I still do it a lot today. But yeah, so that was the start of that, really. He showed me how radio technology worked, and it then and now I found it to be magical stuff. It's extraordinary how radio functions. The idea that a small amount of electric current somewhere can allow you to communicate over vast distances. We're now communicating across the Milky Way, across the galaxy with those same bits of radio technology. Radio is fun. This underpins all of our life today. Our mobile phones, our watches, all of this stuff. Our headphones, except for the headphones that the granddads like you and I are wearing, but the young people's headphones, they're all radio transmitters and receivers. It really is the magic that drives the modern age.
Tell us a little bit about Tape Measure, the track.
I'm not somebody who's particularly anxious day by day, but I am somebody who lies awake in bed at 4 o'clock in the morning, being very anxious. I have no idea why. It just, it turns out rubbish, really. Because one day I thought, I'm so fed up with this. It's a kind of insomnia, really. Well, I just got so fed up with it one day. I just thought, well, if I can't go to sleep, I'm going to get up and I'm just going to write down all this stuff and see what it is. So I did that. It turned out to be a very cathartic thing to do. And when I wrote down all these, it's a very powerful thing to do, writing down your thoughts, because gives you some kind of objectivity over them. When I looked at this stuff, it was like pay bills, remember to call such and such a person, as well as, what happens if everything's a disaster and everything falls to pieces and everything's, blah, 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 blah. When you see it for what it is, I managed to get back to sleep that night quite easily. And of course, the next day, I got up and had to solve this kind of crazy piece of paper. And I thought, well, there's a song in that. So that was the kind of start of that, really.
Blur, traditionally, you're all credited for the songs and the lyrics all together. You split everything. Was it difficult for you to sort of go to a point where you're thinking, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it by myself? I know you've talked about having singing lessons. Was it a big jump from being at the back, holding the rhythm together, being the drummer, to kind of doing everything together?
The big jump really was in getting a team together around me. Blur have been going for so long. If we need an album cover designed, we have a number of people we know that can do that really well. If we, producers, engineers, all of this kind of thing just sort of falls into place to some extent. But obviously in a solo project, which is never actually a solo project, you need a large group of people to make a solo album. But I just didn't have all those people. So kind of finding people who I worked well with and who were on a similar wavelength, that turned out to take an awful lot of time, a lot of trial and error. In terms of the, writing songs, that's something as I said earlier, I think I've always done for, ever since I was a kid. So that wasn't so much for a wrench. Playing live, once I'd made the record and decided, one of the points of the record is to tour. I'm very confident touring with my drums because I know how to do it, and I have a kind of virtuosity with the instrument where I don't have to think about playing the drums. I just imagine a sound and my arms and legs magically create it, in the same way that when you and I are talking, I don't have to think about where to put my tongue. My brain does all that for me, and the words just come out. Well, that's a beautiful place to be in with a musical instrument. It's a wonderful feeling. But of course, I was starting from scratch with vocals, so I thought I can either do the standard thing of refusing to learn from anybody else's experience and making all my mistakes the hard way, or I could just ask somebody how to do it. So, that's the one thing my advancing years have given me is a micro amount of the ability to ask other people for information.
Did you ask any of your bandmates? I mean, how do you guys work together when you're off doing your separate pieces, solo albums, making cheese or whatever it is? Do you consult? Like, did you speak to Damon about your solo album and about singing?
Not about singing, but I did speak to him. Yeah, I asked when I'd finished the record. I sent him a copy and asked for some notes from him, which he was kind enough to give me. He sent me back a page of notes, emailed me a page of notes, which were very helpful. I did that to lots of people. I sent it to lots of different people whose opinions I value. Again, I think it's very hard getting that objectivity, which I was talking about earlier, with writing down thoughts. That's the hardest thing, as in when you're kind of doing some kind of artistic endeavor, really, because you invest your own emotional energy into it. And so it's very hard to know when you get emotional energy back, whether that's just your emotional energy reflected back at you, or whether there is something intrinsic in it, it's very hard to know. So I canvassed far and wide for notes from people, and of course, lots of it was contradictory, and lots of it was absolutely, you know, impossible to put into practice. But it was very useful. Damon's notes are especially very useful. He got what I was asking him to do.
Now, I can imagine, Dave, that when you put your debut solo album together, you talked about, part of the whole idea of an album's going out and touring. Presumably you weren't aware at the time that there's also going to be another big tour planned, or concerts planned, of Blur getting back together to play these massive dates in Wembley. Is that a bit of a clash for you now?
Yeah, that did scupper my touring plans for the year. I mean, it's hard to complain about it, isn't it? But yeah, it didn't. Not only was I not aware that it wasn't going to happen, it seemed very unlikely that it was going to happen. This is something that had been suggested years ago, and for one reason or another, pandemics and post-pandemics and Brexits and all of these kind of things have combined to make that a difficult thing to pull off. And there was a suggestion that it might happen this year, and then immediately that reality bit, and it turned out that it was spectacularly unlikely it was going to happen. And really, the week before, I was on the phone to everybody going, look, I think we better put it back for another year. Let's just see what happens. We'll try again next year. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. A week later, I got the phone call from the agent going, it's happening. I've got to put the tickets on sale on Friday.
How did you feel?
And half the band weren't even available to do any promo or anything. It was like, okay.
Did you say, let me check my diary or something?
Well, I said, let me clear my diary, was what I said. I had the plan. I had a plan to tour my solo album over the summer. That was my plan. And to write another one in the autumn.
What's it like for you four to get back together in a room and start playing again?
It's a bit like going to see your ex. You're not quite sure what's going to happen. Is it going to be a good experience or a bad experience? And then 5 minutes in, you remember why you married them.
Oh, good. I wasn't. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Do you all have this sort of shorthand with each other when you kind of sit in a room?
Yeah, we've been playing together for a long time, so I don't know if there's a shorthand, but we have an understanding. We know we have a good idea about what's going to work when we're coming up with ideas and that kind of thing. Yeah, so but we all, this is not the first time we've got back together again after a long period of absence, so it is the longest period of absence. But anyway, I think it was about, I'm going to say 2015, maybe. I think it was the last gig we did off the last tour. So quite a long time ago. And we've done bits and bobs, We did the very last time we played together was Damon helps put on a festival called Africa Express. We did a kind of surprise appearance there. But yeah, it's an interesting thing, the fact that we always approach this going, is it still going to work? Is the magic still going to be there? And put loads of time in the diary for rehearsals in case it isn't. We have to somehow shoehorn it all back in, only to discover after a couple of days that all we needed was a couple of days.
Are there any songs that you particularly look forward to playing, or any songs that you think, oh God, I'm going to have to play that again?
No, playing live is such a wonderful thing to do. It's its own reward. But by and large, these are festivals that we're playing over the summer. So you get an hour and a half to play, and you really have to play the hits. Otherwise, because you don't even know if it's your fans there. People want to hear music they know. It's slightly different. We're playing Wembley, a couple of dates at Wembley Stadium, and then a date in Dublin, which are kind of our own shows. So we could be a bit more experimental there, I think. But still, we only get an hour and a half, 2 hours. We have an hour and a half to 2 hours of hits. If we don't play one of them, we're going to piss somebody off, aren't we? What are we going to do? I don't know.
We focused on the music, of course. But it's impossible to ignore the fact that you've done so many other things. You've mentioned criminal lawyer, flight instructor, but also your involvement in politics. You've been a Labour county councillor, and you strike me as somebody who, I mean, let's be honest, it'd be very easy to be one of the most successful musicians in this country, sit back, live a comfortable lifestyle. But it seems to me, and you mentioned it earlier a little bit, you alluded to that, do you always need to be doing something, that makes a difference to someone? Is that what keeps you up at night sometimes?
I definitely always need to be doing 3 or 4 things at any one time. Yeah, I've got. I'm the MTV generation. I need a constant parade of colourful, flashing images dancing in front of my eyes. So yeah, I always need a few different things going on. I like to flip between tasks. That's how I work best. So
what got you into politics then? Because, I mean, that is a big step. It's all very well having different things that you can occupy yourself, but politics is something different. I mean, you even stood to become a parliamentary candidate for Labour.
Yeah, well, I'm a Labour activist, so that's the thing we do. We knock on doors primarily. That's what my fundamental political job is, to knock on doors in the neighbourhood looking for problems and offering help. That's how I scratched that particular itch of, looking people in the eye and being helpful to them. That's the first thing that I did, really. I've been a long-standing member of the Labour Party, but an armchair one, always thinking, well, why doesn't somebody do something? Never kind of aware of self-aware enough to realise that somebody might be me, and that was kind of, when I realised that, I just started turning up. And my advice to lay members of the Labour Party, if you don't want it to take over your life, just don't turn up to start with, because it's kind of like the mafia, they suck you in. And once you're in, you can never leave, because there's always just a little more work to do. So, I started getting involved in the organisation and became chair of my branch and political coordinator and all these kind of roles. And was lucky enough to be selected to stand in the ward in Norwich, which is where I was living at the time, and which had the university in. So it was quite an interesting place. Very, very residential, apart from the university, but lots of students living there, lots of university staff living there, and lots of non-university residents, and kind of managing the interface between the university and the non-university sides was 90% of the job. Really, very interesting. There's a lot of interesting problems I uncovered, and the great thing about being a counsellor is you're actually able to help in a very hands-on way. So that was something I really enjoyed.
Are you going to continue your political ambitions? I mean, you tried to get selected for parliamentary candidate. That didn't work out. But are you going to continue your life in politics?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something I really enjoy, something I find very, very satisfying.
Does the blur thing get in the way? Do you knock on people's doors and they kind of go, oh, I want to talk about music?
Well, at the start, when I first got elected, it was big news. It was in the papers, and everyone was very excited. But and the first time I knocked on somebody's door, that often they were kind of quite gobsmacked that I'd actually done that, and I wasn't going to sit back and let somebody else do it, or try to do it by remote control somehow. But one of the fantastic thing about all of that is you weave your way into the community. I got to know all these people, got to know all my residents, and it was like popping round to see friends, checking up on people, making sure that when they had issues, they were being dealt with. If you're a county councillor, often people who need county council services are already in touch with the council, and what you need to manage is when things go wrong. So, again, that could be, when we're talking about children's services, adult social care, those kind of issues, and it can be very traumatic for the residents involved when their, benefits get cut off or whatever it is that's going on. So, really, if you can make a difference, And being a counsellor means you can bang heads together when they need to be banged together, and you can really win for your residents. And all of that is incredibly rewarding. Hard work, and that nobody throws their knickers at you or cheers and applauds when you finished your canvassing session. I was trying to bring that in Norwich, but no, they wouldn't have it. So it's good to be able to. It's good to be able to do both, really.
Well, look, you've got an amazing year ahead of you. You've got those huge concerts with Blur, of course, Wembley Stadium, and your European date as well. When are you going to be able to go out and tour your album, Radio Songs? When are we going to see that?
Realistically, now it'll be next year. So the vague plan is to get another album out in the spring and then tour the two together over the spring and the summer. That's my plan. Unless Blur decides to do another tour next year, in which case they have to put it back again. That's the vague plan.
I tell you what, they're wonderful problems to have.
I know. They really are first world problems, aren't they? They really are.
Dave, thank you so much for giving me all this time. I really appreciate it. I very much enjoyed our chat.